All right, so today we're diving into something that I think a lot of leaders out there can relate to,
Oh, yeah.
strategic planning. But not from the perspective of, having to become a strategic planning guru yourself.
Okay, got it. So more like how to make this whole process a little less, well, daunting.
Exactly. And to help us with that, we're going to take a look at a company called Lancaster Leadership and how they approach it.
I've heard of them, yeah. They've got quite a reputation.
They do, and for good reason. I mean, get this, they've created over 40 strategic plans.
Wow. That's a lot of plans.
Right, for all kinds of organizations, too, from universities and government agencies to small businesses, like the whole spectrum.
So they've pretty much seen it all at this point.
Pretty much. And the thing is, they can work remotely or in person, and they can get it all done, like the whole process, within a pretty tight time frame.
Oh, that's interesting. Like how tight are we talking?
Anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months.
Okay, so whether you're in a rush or you've got some time to breathe, they can work with that.
Exactly. But what really got me hooked was their 6-phase process, and the names they use for each phase are, well, they're pretty catchy.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, it starts with looking back to move strategically forward.
I like that. It kind of reminds me of, you got to know where you've been to figure out where you're doing.
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, and you just kind of forget to pause and reflect.
Totally. Like what's worked in the past, what hasn't. Learn from those mistakes, right?
Exactly. Then they move on to community input from stakeholders.
Ah, so getting everyone's voice in the mix.
Exactly. You can't just create a plan in a vacuum, right? You need buy-in from the people who are actually going to be implementing it.
Makes sense. The more involved people feel, the more invested they are.
And then it gets even more interesting. They have a phase called identifying possibility.
Identifying possibility.
I know, right? This is where it gets really exciting.
So it's about thinking big picture, blue sky thinking, that sort of thing.
Totally. It's like giving yourself and your team permission to dream a little.
I love that. It's so easy to get bogged down in the, just the operational side of things.
But you have to make space for those big, innovative ideas.
Okay, so we've looked back, we've gotten input, we've dreamt big. What's next?
Well, then comes the kind of bringing it all together phase, right? Brainstorm and direction setting.
Okay, so taking all that creative energy and focusing it, right? Shaping it into a real plan.
Exactly. Of course, then you have to actually, do something, right?
Action time.
Yep. So that's their next phase. That's called, very straightforwardly, action planning.
Makes sense. Got to have a plan to actually put things in motion.
And then the final phase is document creation and keeping it alive.
Keeping it alive, huh? I like that.
Yeah. It's a nice reminder that strategic planning isn't just a one-time thing,
Totally. It's got to be a living document.
And speaking of keeping it alive, one thing that really stuck out to me about Lancaster leadership was their philosophy of no bystanders.
No bystanders. What do they mean by that?
So basically, everyone involved in the process is an active participant, no matter what.
Oh, I see. So no one's just sitting on the sidelines observing.
Nope, everyone's got skin in the game, so to speak.
Smart. I can see how that would lead to, a much stronger sense of ownership.
Absolutely. But I'm curious, how do they actually get everyone so engaged? I mean, I got to be honest, strategic planning, sometimes it could be kind of,
Dry.
yeah, dry. So how do they keep people from tuning out?
Well, one of the ways is through this possibility thinking thing we were talking about earlier. They actually encourage teams to imagine ideal outcomes.
So it's not just about what's realistic. It's about, what's the best possible scenario?
Yeah. Think big, explore new possibilities, even if they seem a little far-fetched at first.
Interesting. So shifting that mindset from how do we maintain things to what could we achieve if we really push ourselves?
Exactly. But I imagine that takes a certain level of, comfort for people to really open up like that.
You're right. And that's where the idea of psychological safety comes in.
Psychological safety. Tell me more about that.
So it's all about creating an environment where people feel safe to share their ideas, even if those ideas are a little out there,
I get it. It's about removing the fear of judgment so people can be truly creative.
Exactly. And that's something that I think a lot of teams could benefit from, not just during strategic planning, but in all aspects of their work.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want people to be truly innovative, they have to feel comfortable taking risks.
And that means being okay with making mistakes, not having all the answers, and asking for help when you need it.
Right. And that kind of culture, it has to come from the top down.
For sure. Leaders really set the tone. And from what I've gathered, Lancaster leadership really emphasizes that, creating that safe and supportive environment where people can thrive.
And it sounds like they don't just talk about it, they actually walk the walk.
Oh, yeah. They do a ton of behind-the-scenes work to make sure they're meeting their clients' needs.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. They really tailor their approach to each client's unique situation.
It seems like it. It's about customization and really understanding the client's challenges and goals.
Okay, so this is all super fascinating, but I'm curious, how do they actually make sure that the strategic plan, doesn't just end up gathering dust on a shelf? Like, how do they help their clients keep it alive?
Well, it really comes down to having those action plans and making sure things are measurable.
Right, right. It's got to be more than just like a nice document.
Exactly. I mean, it can't just be good intentions. It's got to be concrete steps and a way to track how things are going.
Totally. It's funny you say that because it's kind of like setting a New Year's resolution, but without any like specific actions to actually make it happen.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, how many times have we all done that? Set a goal and then nothing. Yeah, exactly. So how does Lancaster leadership help their clients, like bridge that gap? Going from those big kind of exciting ideas to actual results.
Well, for what I've seen, they really work closely with the client to break down those big goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and they also focus on helping identify those key performance indicators, those
Oh,
KPIs.
right, so you can actually track your progress and see if you're moving in the right direction.
Exactly. But it's not just about the numbers either.
Right, because you've got all these different people involved with their own, like, perspectives and priorities.
Exactly. And that's where that no bystanders philosophy really comes into play.
Oh, right. So, like, how does that play out in practice?
Well, it's really about emphasizing open and honest communication throughout the whole process.
So, not just collecting feedback, but actually creating a space where people can, like, debate and really challenge each other's assumptions.
Exactly. It's about reaching a shared understanding of what needs to be done, even if you have to, work through some disagreements to get there.
So, it's not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's more about, like, managing it in a healthy way.
Exactly. And, that whole idea of psychological safety that we talked about earlier, that's a huge part of it.
Oh, right, because when people feel safe to speak their minds, it's easier to actually work through those disagreements.
For sure. And that leads to, more creative solutions in the end.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of real-world examples, we have a few quotes here from clients who have actually worked with Lancaster leadership.
Oh, perfect. Let's hear them.
So one that really resonated with me was from Julie Ryan, the executive director of NAU Campus Health Services.
Okay, what did she have to say?
Well, she talked about how Lancaster leadership helped her team kind of reconnect and actually tackle some difficult issues together.
What strikes me about that is it's not just about the technical side of planning. It's about that human element too, like creating a space where people feel comfortable being, well, vulnerable.
Yeah, that's so important. Sometimes the hardest part is just getting everyone to, like, drop their guard and have those honest conversations.
And having that skilled facilitator can make all the difference in the world.
Right. Someone who can guide the conversation, keep everyone focused, and make sure everyone feels heard.
Absolutely. So what other feedback did you come across?
Well, we also have a quote here from David McIntyre, the Community Investment Director for the City of Flagstaff.
Okay, interesting. A totally different type of organization.
Right. And he was talking about how Lancaster leadership helped them take all the feedback they gathered from stakeholders and turn it into something usable.
Ah, so it's not just about collecting the feedback, it's about actually making sense of it all?
Exactly. And he specifically mentioned the insights they gained about communication and, like, team strengths.
That's a great example of how Lancaster leadership goes beyond just creating a plan.
Right.
They're also helping their clients develop the skills they need to keep working together effectively, even after the formal planning process is over.
So it's like they're building a stronger team in the process.
Totally. And, in the end, that's what really matters.
Right. The plan is only as good as the people who are going to implement it.
And if they don't have the skills or the mindset to make it happen, then the plan's not going to be worth much.
Totally agree. Okay, so we've talked about their process, their philosophy, and the impact they've had on their clients.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. But, not everyone's going to hire a firm like Lancaster leadership.
Right, right. It's a pretty specialized service.
So what are some key takeaways that our listeners can apply to their own work, even if they're not leading a huge organization?
That's a great question. I mean, one thing that really stuck with me was that idea of possibility thinking.
Oh, yeah. I love that. It's about challenging those assumptions about what's possible.
Exactly. It's about pushing beyond the status quo and really asking, what if?
And, that kind of thinking can lead to some really innovative solutions that you might have never considered otherwise.
Absolutely. Another big takeaway for me was the importance of psychological safety.
For sure, creating that environment where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas and taking risks.
Exactly. And that's something that leaders at all levels can do, even if they're not leading a formal strategic planning process.
Totally agree. It's about fostering a culture of like trust and respect.
Right, where it's okay to make mistakes and to learn from each other.
And, one more thing I'd add is that strategic planning doesn't have to be this like big, scary, bureaucratic thing.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, it can be as simple as taking some time to like step back and reflect on your goals.
Right, and then just identifying a few key actions you can take to move towards those goals.
Exactly. It's about being intentional and making sure you're like moving in the right direction.
That just makes keeping that plan alive, revisiting it regularly, and making adjustments as needed.
Exactly. Don't let it gather dust on a shelf.
Right. Okay, so I think the big takeaway here is that strategic planning isn't just for, big corporations or organizations.
Anyone can be a strategic thinker.
Exactly, and anyone can contribute to creating a more, innovative and successful future for their team or their organization.
And it all starts with asking the right questions and, being willing to take action.
It strikes me that what we've been talking about, this whole, possibility thinking and psychological safety thing,
Yeah.
it's really about creating a work environment that's just more,
More dynamic.
yeah, more engaging,
Oh, absolutely. It's about fostering that culture of continuous improvement where everyone feels like they can contribute, and make a real difference.
Right, and that can be contagious, right? Like it spreads.
It's like a ripple effect. And you know what? Even if you're not in a leadership position, you can still kind of embody these principles yourself,
Oh, totally.
like in your own work and your interactions with colleagues.
Yeah, like be that person who asks, what if?
Eggs.
Encourage your teammates to share those kind of out there ideas.
Be a champion for psychological safety.
Yes, in your own little corner of the world.
Exactly.
So it's not about waiting for, someone else to create the perfect environment.
Right.
You can just start making those changes yourself.
And even small changes can have a big impact over time.
Yeah, that's so true. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive for me.
Yeah, me too.
It's really, I don't know, it's shifted my perspective on strategic planning. It's not just about the document. It's about the conversation and the vision and empowering people.
And let's not forget, it can be fun too.
Oh, yeah.
Don't be afraid to have some fun with it.
Strategic planning shouldn't be boring. So I think that the main takeaway here is that strategic thinking, it's not just for, CEOs or executives.
It's for everyone.
Anyone can do it.
Exactly.
And anyone can contribute to making their team or their organization more innovative and successful.
It starts with asking the right questions.
And taking action.
Here's a thought for our listeners.
Ooh, yes, hit us with it.
What steps can I take today to make sure your team is ready to create a strategic plan that, brings everyone together and really drives action?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Something to think about. And if you want to learn more about Lancaster leadership and their approach to strategic planning,
Yeah, they're great.
we'll include a link to their website in the show notes.
Definitely check them out.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time.